Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to help you get the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. Well, today is a continuation of a small series that I'm doing on writing from your Zettelkasten. I'm in the midst of creating a book, Unlocking the Treasure, Zettelkasten Beyond Your Wildest Dreams. And in the process of doing that, I am, of course, working from my Zettelkasten, which gives me kind of an unrepeatable opportunity to show you some of the steps that are involved in actually creating a finished work using cards in your Zettelkasten. The last episode, I gathered a number of main cards, all of the main cards that were present in my Zettelkasten that referred to the Zettelkasten. I divided it into the major subgroups for the topic as a whole, and this time I'm focusing in on one of those subgroups and recognizing that it itself has substructure, pulling the substructure out of the existing collection of cards and showing you how I notate that and how I interleave the new card area with the old. Now I'd like to begin by pointing out that even though I divided this area into a number of subtopics, this does not in any way constitute the outline of my book. The outline of my book is totally independent and is based on the best way of teaching the information, not the best way of organizing the information for knowledge retention. So I'd like to invite you to come on over to the down-facing camera where I will go over with you the work that I'm doing right now, because it's something that I have to capture it now or it's gone till the next big project. So come on over and I'll show you how I am separating my first topic area into substructures. See you over there. Okay, where we left off last time, I had taken the jumbo stack of cards that relate to what's in my Zettelkasten about the Zettelkasten, and I had divided them up into all of these groups according to the topics that I knew I wanted to cover in the book and in my Zettelkasten course. And I found when I went through the cards that there was one extra topic that I hadn't considered, which was present on its own. And that was information about how I wanted to teach the principles, which is not actually anything being taught, but the methods that I wanted to use to teach. So that topic was emergent, but all of these other topics were expected and pre-planned. A slightly different thing begins to emerge when I break down these individual categories. So today I'm going to show you what came out of working with this first category. I want to share why I think a Zettelkasten is so valuable. So here's the foundation card that I made last time, where I captured my reasoning and my reaction to that very question of wanting to cover why the Zettelkasten is so valuable. Now, I don't have any pre-planned subgroups for this, so what I want to show today is how the subgroups emerged as I worked with it. Okay, so this time I didn't have a pre-designed set of categories that I knew I wanted to sort this region into, so I took the cards, and as I examined each and every one, I put it into a pile, and one by one, I listed what I found on the card. And what I did in creating these piles was I associated the groups based on topics that seemed to fit together, that seemed to cover the same subject matter. So when I was finished with this sorting, I began to review what I had available. I had this one lonely little group that was who the Zettelkasten book was for, but it really is an independent topic from the other ones, so it's valid and I want to include it, so it gets to be its own group, even if it only has one card in it. This was a very cohesive group around what happens when you form associations with your Zettelkasten, and this group hangs together really well. But when I began working with this group, I discovered that I actually had two different topics here, that these were all about the nature of a Zettelkasten, and these other two were more about what you get out of keeping a Zettelkasten. So I decided that it would really be more beneficial to split these two out into their own group. So they got their own tag, and I crossed them off here. Now from there, it was just a matter of saying, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I know I'm looking at how to subdivide 6a, so I know I need 6a1, 6a2, 6a3, 6a4. I felt that I would present the nature of the Zettelkasten first, then talk about associations, then the benefits, and at some point in time, not sure exactly where, who the book is for. Now I know the order of these 4 doesn't matter deeply because they're all going to go onto the 6a directory card. Okay, now that I've decided on my subgroups, I'm going to look at the different subgroups in turn. So I'm going to set aside all but the 6a1. So now I need to create a foundation card that's going to head up this 6a1 group. Unlike a normal process of developing a Zettelkasten, instead of creating the card and then placing it, I already knew the card number, so I went ahead and put that in. Then I reviewed the contents of each of these, and the one that really heads the group, in my view, is this really fascinating observation that I made back in August of 1922, over 2 years ago. And this is one of those interesting cards that sometimes you'll run into in your Zettelkasten when you've had yours for a while, where you read a card and you're kind of surprised that that's created by you, and then you look and yes, it really was. Because I love the insight that this card presents, which is that what a Zettelkasten truly is the process that goes on that you do with the cards, and the cards themselves are just really what gets left behind as sort of a souvenir of the process. Other cards in the group talk about how the Zettelkasten lets you visualize and actually see the processes of your mind, and how it's actually a tool to communicate with your own mind. So now I created a foundation card that summarizes the content of this group, and I felt the clearest statement of what that group says as a whole is that the physical objects of Zettelkasten are what the process leaves behind. And my reaction to it is, do not mistake the physical objects as the Zettelkasten. So now it's time for me to make the directory card, where I take each of those 3 cards and I show a link to where the card is located normally within my Zettelkasten, and I use the tagline from each. And likewise for the individual cards, I created a directory card that points back to where the parent card is. In doing this, I discovered that this card already had a directory card, which points to a link elsewhere in the Zettelkasten, actually in another card that's been pulled for a different section of the book. So in this case, all I had to do was add 6A1 to the list as a new entry for this same directory card. Well, in the process, this card also had a directory card. It was an oops. This card already contained a link to 6A. I want to give it a link to 6A1, not 6A. Now what do? Do I take this card and throw it away and say, oh, I've got the wrong line? No, we don't renumber cards and we don't throw things away. All I needed to do there was mark this with an E with a circle around it. What that tells me is it means it's an error. I didn't really want to link it to this one. I really wanted to link it to this one. And part of the reason why I keep them is it's much less work to put in that E and add one line rather than start all over and make a whole new directory card. And furthermore, who knows, that extra link might prove to be serendipitous at some point in the future. So it's worth hanging on to. Certainly not something that I'm going to scratch off and make ugly with little scratch, 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 scratch. Just that polite little E, and then I do it the correct way. Now that means that this E, since it pointed to 6A, and 6A must then point to it. And sure enough, there's the entry. So on this 6A card, I also marked that with an E. Now while I'm still writing, I'm going to keep all of these cards as a group with 6A1 because otherwise I'm going to be ending up pulling them again to reference them. Since they're already pulled, I'll keep them together until the writing is done, and then I'll refile them. And I'm obviously not done yet because I have to do other sections of 6A. Okay, one of the things that I'd like to point out is that to do the writing, I would not necessarily have had to set up a whole new division within my Zettelkasten just to support the writing. Pulling the cards was sufficient. I could simply have declared a section in my workbox and put dividers for the various categories that would just be used temporarily, and I could write from it without any need to go through all the effort of creating new divisions, creating foundation cards, and then having to index the foundation cards. The reason why I'm doing all that structure work is that when I first began keeping my Zettelkasten, I had no notion that I would ever be teaching Zettelkasten. I was having trouble enough learning the Zettelkasten. And it turned out that my Zettelkasten notes kind of came in somewhat haphazardly. Part of the reason I think for that haphazardness was that Scott's book was not yet out. When I first started following Scott Schepper, he had 6 videos and fewer than 100 subscribers to his YouTube channel, and the book was over a year away yet. So I just picked up what I could as his videos came out. And following my system, I simply attached it to the ideas that were already in my Zettelkasten that their notes pertained to. The end result was that there was no systematic structure in my Zettelkasten that covered the Zettelkasten as a unified topic. So I wanted to impose that structure, not just for writing this book, but so that anytime any other new cards come into existence, they can come into existence within a structure where I can find things easily that relate to a given topic. You probably didn't notice because the numbers get rather long, but the cards that went into each of these sections, into 6A or even just into 6A1, were not all tightly together in my Zettelkasten. They had come from other areas and had come together when I pulled the cards. So that's really what I wanted to share with you. And because this is happening in real time, it's an opportunity to grab what it takes to create out of a Zettelkasten, because I'm actually creating out of a Zettelkasten. It's not, it's far more realistic when it's being done for real instead of when it's being done as to create a model to share with you. So I hope you're enjoying this series, and I will continue it as I work until I feel that I've pretty much covered what I need to share with you about this process. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.